Hello everyone. Today we're going to be learning how to create fill and stroke effects on shapes in Photoshop. All right, here we go. So for starters, we are going to select a rectangle shape right there on the toolbar, the rectangle tool, and we're going to look at the fill options first. So whenever you select a brand new tool, you'll always notice that at the top here, that tool is featured and all of the different effects and options that go along with that tool are displayed on this horizontal panel. So when I click on my rectangle tool, you're going to notice that there's something called a fill option. And when you click on the fill option, there's all different effects that we can actually work with to fill our shapes. In this case, we're going to be working with rectangles. So you'll notice when you first open up the fill box, a few things that you can observe here is that they have a whole bunch of color swatches that you can choose from to fill your shapes in with. And there's also a little option right here. So like, let's just pretend that you didn't want to use any of the colors in this little swatch palette and you wanted a customized color. You can always click on this little rainbow swatch and your color picker will pop up and you can pick any color of your choosing. Click OK, and suddenly it will create a little swatch of that color that you can use. So that's just good to know that it's there. Then up here, you'll notice 1, 2, 3, 4 different rectangles. And each of these represent different types of fills for your shapes. Now, as I over the first one, you'll see this one is called no color. So let's explore what that actually means. So let's click on the no color option. And I'm going to click and drag and create a shape. Create a rectangle right there. So here's the interesting thing. You'll notice that the no color option sounds exactly like what it means. So when we create that shape, it's completely empty. There's no fill, there's no paint in there. There's no other kind of patterns or effects in there. It's just empty. And you see it just as like a very thin outlined shape. Now, what's interesting about this is that if I were to print this page, there would actually be nothing on the page because this outline would not even show up. Okay, so just to start, we're going to make like a little guide for ourselves of what all these different effects do. And I'm still going to rename my layers as I always do. And I'm going to call this one the no color fill. So we know exactly what that's all about, what it's called. And also what the effect does. So I'm just going to save my file while I'm at it. Okay, and I'm just going to save that to my desktop for now. There we go. Okay, so moving along, let's create a brand new layer. So in the layers palette, we know there's that little post-it note looking icon right there that's folded, and it's the new layer icon. So let's click on that. Make sure that your rectangle tool is selected and click back on fill. You might have noticed that when I created a brand new layer, that rectangle, the one that we just created, disappeared. It did not actually disappear, it's just that I clicked on a brand new layer. So just to illustrate that really quick, watch what happens when I click on the no fill, the no color fill. Okay, so you can see that it reappeared, it's still there, it's just that it's not visible to us. Okay, so back to my new layer and click on fill. Let's see what the next effect is. So as I hover over the one to the right, you can see that it is actually a solid fill. There we go. I was trying to get it to show what it's called. Okay, so this is the solid color fill. It sounds just like what it means. And this is where you get to actually use your swatches, or you can use the custom color picker as I showed you before. See when I click on that and I can create any color that I want. Maybe I'll create a purple, a light purple. And you see it actually will create a swatch of it, and my eyedropper tool will pop up as well when I want to select a certain color from my swatches. And I'm going to create a rectangle that is completely filled with solid color. So let's call this one a solid color fill. All right, and I'm going to save as I go along. That's really important. Every new step that I take, I always make sure to save so I don't lose any of my work. All right, let's create a brand new layer. And we're going to select fill once again. And let's move on to the next fill effect, which is the gradient. So you'll notice that the gradient icon looks just like that. It's a gradient. So it's that smooth blend from dark to medium to light, as opposed to the solid color, which is just like it sounds. It's a solid color fill. And there we go. Let's click on the gradient and let's make a rectangle. There we go. And it does exactly like it sounds. It will create a gradient effect in there. So let's name this one gradient fill. And let's save it. But I'm going to click back on the gradient fill because I want you to see all of the cool effects that you can create with a gradient. They're like endless. So the first thing that you're going to observe is the fact that there's several swatches available. A swatch is really just a fancy way of saying like a little sample in a square of all of the different effects that you can create with the gradient tool. These are actually presets. These are already made and you can select any of them. There's a little slider bar as well that will reveal some more samples of gradients there, but I'm just going to click on some of them. And you'll notice that my rectangle changes as I select the different swatches. There's some really nice options here. The rainbow one's a lot of fun. But I'm going to select, let's see, I'll select this one. Okay, so something that you can also observe is that when I select each swatch, there's a bar here at the bottom that really showcases what that swatch is all about. So actually, I'm going to backtrack. I think I'm going to click on this one, the red and green for now. Okay, so I'm clicking on one that only features two different colors blending together because I want to point out some of the effects that the gradient does and creates. So right now, you will notice that on one end of this bar, on one extreme, we have a little swatch of the red color, this pure red color, and then it's called a color stop. And then on the opposite side, we have this sort of forest green color. And what's cool about Photoshop is that you'll notice in the middle, that's where the two colors blend and create this beautiful gradient, this beautiful blend. And Photoshop is already set with the algorithm to do that. You don't have to do anything. But let's see here. You can also change colors of your gradient. So the fact that it has like a little swatch here, let's just test that out. I'll double click on it and maybe I'll go with, okay, I'm going to go with a light sort of yellow. Okay, there we go. So isn't that beautiful? And just by clicking on the swatch, you can totally change the look and the effect of that gradient. And it's a really cool thing to see. Okay, so let's move on and explore some more of the gradient option effects for our fills. We'll go back to fill. Make sure your rectangle tool is selected, which mine is. And let's create yet another rectangle. There we go. And click back on fill. Now this time I'm going to select the red and green fill again. Oh, there we go. Okay, here's the red and green. And actually, I'm going to go with this orange and sort of blue-violet one. So I want you to pay attention to what happens when I use the slider tool on this bar. You actually have an opportunity to slide the swatch over, and depending on how far you slide it, you will see more or less of a certain color. You'll also observe that in the middle of these two swatches, there's a tiny little diamond icon. That diamond represents where the two colors mix and blend together. So you see, like when I bring it back and it's 50% one color, 50% the other, that little diamond is right there and it's showing you where they're going to blend together. Now, reversely, if I move my orange over, take a look at the rectangle. So it's mostly orange, a little bit of the blue violet, and then you can see where those two colors are blending. Okay, so another thing that we're going to try is adding another color to the mix. And just by clicking underneath, you will see that another color swatch square pops up. Now, I happen to like the look of this white. I think it looks really pretty, actually. But if you wanted to, and that's actually the default, is it's always going to add like a little white dot typically. But if I wanted to change that color, I can double click it, use my color picker. Let's see. Maybe I'll do like a lightish pink. I think that looks really nice together. Okay, I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice that now there's two diamonds because there's 2 points where these colors are blending together. It blends together, the pink blends with that blue-violet right in the middle between those two colors. And then the pink also blends with the orange right in between the two of them. So that's why we have this effect right here. And if you wanted to change it up, you could always move your sliders around and play with all those different effects. So for now, I'm going to call this one the color picker gradient fill. Okay, and let's save our work and move along. So we're going to create a brand new layer. And this time, we're going to move on from the gradients. And let's take a look at our last effect, our last fill effect option. So this one is the pattern option. So let's click on it and let's create a rectangle. Okay, and I'm just going to click back inside the fill. So the pattern is pretty straightforward. It does exactly like it sounds. And you'll notice that just like the other fill options, that there's several swatches available. I'm just going to click on them, and as I click, observe the rectangle. So you see there's all different pattern effects that you can use inside your shape. And here's another interesting feature. If you look down below, it says scale. So scale means that you can increase or decrease the size of the pattern. And it has a little arrow right here and a slider. So when you slide it to the right, you'll notice that the pattern gets bigger and bigger. So it almost looks like bubbles, this particular one. And if you slide it to the left, your pattern will get much smaller. And it's interesting because depending on how big or small it is, it can look like certain textures. So depending on how your design is or how it lends itself, you can decide how you want your slider to be. So I'm just going to click on the other swatches because I enlarged the size of the slider. I think this one I'll make even bigger. Okay, and I'm going to stick with the bubble one because I like it. And we're going to call this one pattern fill. Okay, and I'm going to save right there. So those are really all of the fill options. I'm going to click on the no color fill. And it's funny because I couldn't see where it was located before. Now it's actually located on top of my other rectangle. I'm just going to click on the move tool at the top of my tool panel. And it's funny, I could also see I made it a little smaller than the other ones now, so I'm going to try to match the size or at least the length of the others so it looks a little nicer. Okay, and I'm going to save my work right there. And I'm going to stop here and stay tuned for part 2 where we learn all of the different stroke effects and options as well.